This podcast contains adult content and themes. For a full list of our content warnings, please see our show notes. Listener discretion is advised.
When the fears have taken their toll, when the demons have got up control, when the shadows just won't leave you alone, I'll be there. When your rainbows have turned into black, when the sun has turned its back, when all of your power let itself dry, I'll be
Welcome, my dear traveler, to the Morbid Forest. I clearly remember warning you about this. My wards are nothing to scoff at. Now look at you. Trapped, cold, frightened, and alone. All because you didn't heed my warning. Hush up now. Save your strength. You'll need it in the underground.
What can I get you? Wine? Scotch? Coke?
Wine would be great.
Red? White?
Red.
Oh, for me too.
Matt got up from where the three of them were sitting around a wooden coffee table and walked over to a nearby well-appointed walnut bar cabinet, selected a bottle, and began peeling the foil off.
The house looks great.
Susan continued,
Thanks for inviting us over.
Not at all.
answered Holly, who was just walking into the room where they sat.
It was overdue. We needed to have you. The house, of course, still needs quite a bit of work, but if we waited until we finished to have guests, it would never happen.
Holly set down a tray of hors d'oeuvres on the table, then sat herself down with them.
So, what was the story with the closing?
Jake asked, reaching over to pick up a cracker layered with a thin pink slice of prosciutto.
Well, when Matt and I did the walkthrough, they had not removed, as promised, these large white trellises lining the sides and back of the house. They were completely overgrown with vines. It was a small thing, but it was supposed to be part of the deal. I wanted to hold up closing, or at least get them to give us the $500 it would cost to have it all removed. It was within our rights, and I'm a real estate lawyer, for heaven's sake.
But calmer heads prevailed.
Matt interrupted as he extracted the cork with a slight pop and started pouring generously.
It was hard enough getting this house. And if we stood firm, they probably would have had another offer the next day. Not to mention we'd have to hold up the movers and pay an extra God knows what if we kept arguing. It wasn't worth it.
That's Matt's way of saying the great business negotiator was a pushover and caved. Anyway, he agreed to do all the removal work if I would hold my tongue, so he didn't say a thing, just smiled as we signed all the documents. He needs the exercise anyway.
Matt handed the wine to their guests. Jake took another of the appetizers.
Oh, Holly, these are really good. You should try one, Susan.
He said, motioning to the plate.
Thanks!
Holly replied, basking with the compliment.
We made them ourselves. Well, mostly Matt, but it is a joint effort. So, as I was saying, we had all the boxes and some furniture moved in that day. We didn't have much from the old house, as you can see. The next day, Saturday, Matt got up early and started pulling down all those vines and trellises.
Harder work than I thought. And when I got the last one down, I found a peculiar hole at the base. At first I thought it was a groundhog burrow or some such. And we'd have to call an exterminator. With the little digging I could do by hand, however, I realized it was an actual opening to a proper tunnel.
A tunnel?
Yes, a brick tunnel. Wide enough for a person and clearly pretty old. I went and got Holly. My first thought was to call the Historical Society. Parts of the house go back to the 1700s, It was here when Washington's army came through in 1777. But after discussion with my lawyer,
Matt gestured at Holly.
she shut the idea down.
If they find something historical here, all our renovations are off for now, and any future permitting would be pure hell. Heck, we might even lose the home to eminent domain if some group wants to preserve it for some reason. So we agreed to do our own research and excavation first, so to speak. Not to disturb anything, but to make sure of what we might be getting into and maybe keep quiet about anything that didn't have to be disclosed.
So, on advice from counsel, I went to our local hardware store and got some headlamps, shovels, and a pickaxe and started digging. After getting past the initial 1 to 2 feet, there wasn't too much to clear. It had just been a bit of dirt blocking the entrance. The tunnel travels under the house about 10 feet, about 3 feet wide and 5 feet high, and then curves around for another 20 or so where it opens to a room.
A room?
Yeah, maybe 10 by 10, around 6 feet high. I could just barely stand up in it. In the room were a couple of wooden chairs and some old glass and pottery debris. It was freaking amazing.
So, what do you think it is?
Well, there are a few possibilities. It could simply have been an old cellar for the house, although why the tunnel courses the way it does would not make sense. Matt wondered if it were a smuggler's tunnel for people avoiding tariffs on goods back in colonial days.
Smugglers? Pirates. That would be so cool. I studied colonial history in college.
You did, didn't you? Well, at least as far as I can determine with a little internet research, that explanation's a strong candidate. It would explain some of the layout, and it would fit with the age of the house. Although we are a mile or two from river traffic and the typical landing sites for such goods.
But being a bit removed from the river would have been a useful strategy for storing contraband, and in fact was pretty common. It would be safer and less suspicious, even if less convenient.
That was my thought exactly. Although Holly thinks otherwise.
My idea is that this was a stop on the Underground Railroad, a place to temporarily hide rescued slaves in the 1850s. That would explain why the tunnel's path followed the house, but then the room at the end was off to the side. It could be blocked off if it needed to be hidden. We know such slaves came through this area, and there is a prominent historical marker for the same just down the street.
Are you serious? One of my ancestors, one I was named after, came north on the Underground Railroad. She could have come through this very house.
Really? Well, as I said, it's a possibility.
So, can we see it?
Yeah, you can't give us a story like that and not let us see. My great-great-great-grandmother might have hidden right here. This could be a part of my history. Why I exist.
Holly glanced at Matt, who nodded.
Well, I guess so. Although we are not completely sure how safe the tunnel is. It's a bit muddy. You will get dirty going through. And it's a bit claustrophobic. Are you sure you want to?
Yes.
Well, why don't we eat dinner first? After you go down there, you will probably be a mess and need cleaning up. Also, we should wait until later so no one else sees us going down and starts making inquiries. And you guys have to promise to keep this secret.
Oh, we promise.
Scout's honor.
Jake added, holding up the 3 fingers of his right hand in the Boy Scout salute. The four moved over to the dinner table to eat. They touched on other topics. Mutual acquaintances, work, music, weather, sports. But mostly Jake and Susan behaved a bit like kids forced to sit through Christmas breakfast before they could open presents. Albeit kids who downed healthy portions of a rich stew and 2 bottles of Chianti between them. As they finished, Jake got up to help clear plates, but Holly waved him off.
Sit down, I'll take care of it. Are you ready for dessert?
No. You can't hold out on us any longer. We'll have dessert after we see the underground tunnel.
Yes. You can't dangle this in front of us and keep us waiting any longer. History first, dessert later.
Okay, I'll go get the headlamps. I'll meet you outside.
The other three went outside. It was dark now, a moonless night. They walked to the back of the house where the opening to the tunnel was covered with a canvas. Matt came out about 5 minutes later.
I could only find 2 of the headlamps. Jake and Susan, you strap these on. I'll just use the flashlight on my phone. I mostly know how the tunnel layout works. Holly, you should probably stay up here in case something happens.
I have no desire to go down now and get mucked up anyway. I'll work on the dishes and dessert.
Matt pulled away the canvas, revealing a hole about 2 by 3 feet wide.
I'll go in first.
He instructed Jake and Susan.
Then I'll shine my light at the entrance so you can follow. The initial drop is about 4 feet, and then it slopes down. Turn your headlamps on after you're in, and you're going to have to walk bent over for the first bit.
Matt went in feet first, hitting the dirt with a slight thud, then moving a bit further down the tunnel and out of sight of those above. A beam of light illuminated the tunnel entrance as he turned on his phone's flashlight and shined it so the other 2 could see as they followed. Susan went in smoothly, landing on her feet. Jake slipped, fell on his butt, and slid on the dirt floor.
I warned you you'd be a mess.
The 3 moved slowly down the tunnel, which was brick-lined except for the floor. By necessity, they walked hunchback until the tunnel opened into a small room, its walls built in the same English brick pattern as the tunnels. There were, as promised, some pottery shards that looked like broken plates, and broken glass on the grounds. Susan and Jake each picked up an artifact to inspect.
We tried to leave everything in place for the most part, in case we ultimately let the preservationists in.
Susan walked slowly along the walls of the room, letting the fingertips of her right hand brush against the brick, as if trying to absorb the history of the room by feel. As she was doing this, her fingers felt a crack in the wall. She stopped and studied what she'd felt.
Guys, over here!
What is it?
Look, there's a doorway here.
She traced a barely perceptible crack line that ran through the brick pattern, marking a rectangle extending from the floor to about 5 feet high and 2 feet wide.
Wow! I hadn't seen that before!
He pushed on the left side of the newly discovered door, and it began to swing inward, the sound of unoiled metal hinges creaking loudly. They looked at each other. Jake started to go in, but Matt grabbed his shoulder.
Are you sure we should? We don't know what is in there.
Exactly,
said Jake, and he charged forward. Susan followed right behind, and Matt then behind her. The new room was slightly larger than the last, about 12 by 12 feet. There was a wooden chest along one of the walls. Susan went over and lifted the lid. What caught her eye first was a dust-covered leather-bound book, which she pulled out and opened. Jake, looking in, was entranced by something metal glinting at the bottom of the chest. He reached down to pick it up.
My God. This is a flintlock pistol. It's probably from the 18th century. You would load it once to fire, and then, if you were in close combat,
He pointed at the brass ball at the base of the handle.
you could use this to pummel your enemy. And look! It's got the crown mark on the side plate. This would definitely have been an officer's pistol. Maybe someone captured it.
That's amazing! May I?
Matt took the gun from Jake and examined it. Jake looked over at his wife, who seemed to be on the verge of tears as she looked at the volume she'd found.
What's wrong, honey?
Jake said, putting his hand on her shoulder.
Listen.
She started reading, her voice breaking at times.
Diary of Susan Carter. Sunday, 14th April, 1854. We arrived at Mr. Johnson's farmhouse yesterday evening. It was very cold. We had to lay in the wagon under hay for hours. Ma said we had to stay very still. It was hard not to sneeze. We didn't get no dinner today, and we had to wait until supper to eat when Mrs. Johnson brought us some grits. It was cold, but still good. Later tonight, we were going to leave and go to a place called Pennsylvania, where everyone is free. She said we're gonna change our name there So we have a free name. No more Carter.
Jesus, Susan, do you think that's your family?
I think so.
Susan sat down on the lid of the chest, and Jake sat with her, his arms around her. Just then, the light from Matt's phone blinked out. He looked at the screen.
Light stopped working. Damn phone needs charging. I'm gonna go get another headlamp. I should have done it in the first place. I'm guessing you guys want to stay here for a bit. Are you okay to wait a minute until I get back?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, we'll be fine.
Be back soon.
Matt said as he left, the door slowly creaking closed behind him. Susan continued staring at the leather volume.
I can't believe this. My great-great-great-grandmother's diary? It's like getting back a piece of me.
I know, it's amazing to think of all the American history that passed through this house.
While Susan sat and read further, Jake probed further around the room for more finds. He noticed a few musket balls scattered near the walls. Walking near the center of the room, he almost tripped over a piece of rock. He looked down to see that the dirt seemed to be covering a central stone slab distinct from the rest of the floor. He paused for a second, but considered that he was already irrevocably dirty, and got down on his hands and knees to try to clear the slab, which seemed to be about 4 by 4 feet, to investigate further. As he pushed it aside, his headlamp started to flicker. He stood up, slapping his hands together to remove some of the dust and dirt as he rose.
My light's starting to go out too, so we'll need another one. I'm gonna go see what's keeping Matt.
Jake walked over to the door, which had shut, and pulled its rusted metal handle to open it. It felt stuck. He gave a second, stronger tug, but again without success, and was about to try more vigorously when Susan called out.
Jake, come here.
What is it?
There's something off about the diary.
What?
Well, look at this entry. April 14th, 1854. It is the exact same entry from 10 pages previous.
Well, it's a bit strange. But maybe there was some damage to the first page and she tried to copy it. Or it was just a copy exercise. That was not uncommon back then. And they would have been stuck in places like this for days, waiting for the next stop without much to do and unable to make any noise.
There's another thing. This is the diary of a 12-year-old slave. How did she learn to write? I know I come from smart people, but that would have been forbidden. And how could a penniless fugitive afford a leather-bound diary?
Jake went back to the pistol and considered it. The crown mark on the barrel was good, but almost too good, as if it was stamped rather than engraved. The wood handle was also a bit too smooth. No expected pitting or degradation given where it had been stored. Jake thought for a minute and shook his head.
Maybe Matt and Holly are having some fun with us, giving us fakes to pull us in.
If so, it's a pretty shitty prank. Come on, let's get out of here.
Susan pulled at the door, which was still stuck. Jake tried with all his strength, but it wouldn't budge.
Crap! Matt! Matt! You got us! You win! Now let us out!
No sound. Jake's light, which had been flickering, was now out completely.
Matt! Open the door! My light's gone. It's not funny anymore. Let us the fuck out.
They both yanked at the door again and again. They pounded on it and yelled for Matt. Susan took out her phone.
Of course there's no signal down here.
They felt around the walls trying to find, they weren't sure, perhaps another exit. Maybe this was some super weird escape room prank. Susan's headlamp now began to flicker.
Matt! Holly, please stop this! Let us out, please!
After a bit, they instinctively sat down and huddled together, their backs to one wall, staring at the door, waiting for whatever this was to end. Without saying anything, they jointly decided they weren't going to give Matt or Holly the satisfaction of seeing them scared, assuming there was some hidden camera watching all this. The room suddenly went dark. They both gasped. Susan reached into her pocket to get out her phone for light, but abruptly paused.
Jake, did you hear that?
What? I don't hear.
Kiefer screamed at what they saw. They continued screaming for the next 10 minutes, but for other, more painful reasons. Holly and Matt sat in their living room sipping scotch, Matt reading the newspaper and Holly looking through a binder of paint colors. Matt looked at his watch.
12:15. Should be over by now.
Good. So do you think we should have him redo the powder room fixtures or repaint the dining room first?
How many more items are on the punch list?
12, 13, 14. I can't stand that salmon color, but it would be better to have a working bathroom down here.
I thought he agreed to do one repair for each offering.
Yes, and I'm pretty sure we could have gotten 2 per sacrifice if you had just let me negotiate. But we absolutely need to have the gutters replaced first. We don't want more water damage, so that leaves only one of these for now.
Then the bathroom, I guess.
Agreed. So you'll deal with him?
I'll do it tomorrow. The meat should be ready by then, too.
Don't go too early. Remember, per the contract, we can't go in between midnight and 6. Otherwise, we're trespassing and we'd owe him a penalty.
Yeah, I remember. Anyway, I'm glad you suggested we get the meat included in the contract. There is something about freshly cut brisket that does make such a wonderful stew, and it would otherwise go to waste. It's just their souls he wants. I don't think he actually eats any of the sacrifices.
Aw, my little environmentalist. And what you lack in negotiating skills, you do make up for with your cooking.
Fresh ingredients make the meal.
So, who can we invite over next? I think we owe Dan and Janet. And
Holly said, holding up a paint swatch to the light.
I do think the dining room will look so much better painted arsenic green.
This has been a Morbid Forest production, and on this week's episode you heard Underground, written by D.H. Parish, with narration by Devyn Boer as your narrator, Ron Hyatt as Matt, Kiefer Light as Jake, Naomi Richards as Susan, and Jessica Hart as Holly. Story editing and audio production by Naomi Richards. Music and sound effects provided by Epidemic Sound. Our theme music this season is The Shadows by Nandi Bushhill. Follow us on X or Twitter if you're old school, Instagram, Blue Skies, Tumblr, Threads, and Discord to stay up to date on all the happenings within the forest. Interested in more morsels of the forest? Then join our Patreon. As a faithful traveler, you'll receive exclusive access to ad-free early episode releases and bonus content for only $3 a month. That's patreon.com/themorbidforest. Love what you're hearing? Then leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Reviews and ratings help us get more travelers out there, just like you. Interested in hearing your story on Season 6? Then send it over to themorbidforest@gmail.com. We only have 2 more episodes left in this season, and I hope you're ready for them. With that, we'll see you next time, travelers, on The Morbid Forest.